Hello, my wonderful, beautiful friends. Guys, welcome back to r/MaliciousCompliance, where people get exactly what they ask for, and a lot of the times, they definitely regret it. Guys, I hope you're having a superb day today, and as usual, the stories are spectacular, so I hope you enjoy them, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button for future tales, guys. We're diving in. So, I've worked in bars for years, and this has to be one of the best moments of my time. I used to work with this guy who was always on it. We'll call him Sam. He was super smart, never lost for words, very funny, and genuinely one of the most professional bartenders that I've ever worked with. And this was an exceptional night. We usually work 2 to a station on really busy nights, so I had a front row seat to this gem. So a smug, greasy idiot is waiting in front of our station with his elbow on the bar, not facing us. Getting a little annoyed that he's blocking people getting served, Sam taps him on the arm and says, "Hey man, do you want anything?" The guy then looks at Sam and says, "In a sec, can't you see I'm busy?" He then shoos him off and continues hitting on this drunk girl. So Sam, starting to change his attitude, says, "Hey, you're blocking people from the bar, man. You gotta make an order or you have to leave." Now at this, I start to slow down thinking, oh my goodness, where's this going? The greasy guy then stands up slowly and stares Sam up and down and says, "Alright, give me a Coke." Sam whips out a glass, throws some ice in the cup, glass on the bar, and then throws a straw in there as he pours the Coke from the soda gun. Sam says, "That'll be $2.50. Thanks," as he spins around and punches it into the till. Now, the guy is staring at the drink. He then lets out a huff and says, "Hey, what the hell is this?" "A Coke, as you asked," Sam said with impatience. The guy then responds, "That is not what I asked for. If I wanted ice, I would have asked for ice. How about you do your goddamn job properly?" Pushing the glass back at Sam. Sam picks up the glass with both hands and did something that I wasn't expecting, that nobody around us was expecting. He apologizes. Sam says, "Oh, you are so right. I am so sorry. How stupid of me. I make this drink hundreds of times a day, and how dare I forget to ask you if you wanted ice or not? Let me fix that for you." At that point, Sam then grabs the soda gun and proceeds to squirt Coke all over the bar counter towards the jerk. The idiot pulls his arm away, not because he notices it, but because his shirt is getting wet. The guy's fuming at this point, screaming, "What are you doing?" Sam responds, "If you wanted a glass, you would have asked for one." He then throws a straw in the puddle, turns his back, walks off, and flips the bird. My hero. Guys, I'm not gonna lie, that was pretty badass. Sam sounds like a great guy to be around. I'd imagine he got a lot of tips from people seeing that rude idiot getting served too. And him throwing the straw onto the counter was the cherry on top that I didn't know I needed. Absolutely brilliant. So, this was about 5 years ago. I worked as a chef at a bakery. It was my job to make everything but the baked goods. Every morning, the baker and I would walk in at about 4 a.m. and knock out all the food needed for the day. This would leave me ready to go home around 10 a.m. or so. And it also put us at the perfect time to deliver online orders. It was common for companies or other entities to place large catering orders with us. The baker and I would split them down the middle and deliver them on our way home. The delivery in question was for Bob, Dick, and Harry, attorneys at law. Now, I had never delivered to them before, but they were a regular of sorts. Every financial quarter, they would hold a huge meeting. The meeting would require roughly $700 of baked goods. The spread includes 8 dozen bagels, all 10 flavors of cream cheese, pastries, brownies, and enough coffee to power a college dorm through finals week. My passenger seats, entire back seats, and entire trunk are filled with food. Now, Bob, Dick, and Harry's is located on the 9th floor of a commercial skyscraper, deep in the industrial complex downtown. Parking was non-existent. Now, there were meters outside the building, but I knew I'd need close to 10 trips to deliver all the food, and I did not have a lot of change on me. So the company policy was to just pay whatever fines I needed to park and then turn in my receipts. The money would then end up on my next paycheck. So the building itself has its own parking garage, so I pull in. The security guard, who, let's call Sam, stops me and says the parking garage is for employees only. So I happily show him my delivery invoice and offer him a bribery bagel. Sam refuses the bagel and says I can park in one of the guest spots on the bottom floor. The fee is $5 for every 30 minutes, minimum $10. I thanked him and head to the bottom floor of the garage. So there are a total of 6 guest parking spaces. Just 6, and all of them are taken. So I decide to head up and talk to Sam when I see an opening parking spot reserved for Bob, Dick, and Harry, attorneys at law. There are cars in every spot, with many spots being reserved for employees by name. The last spot is empty and reserved for guests of Bob, Dick, and Harry. I think, perfect, so I pull on in. I grab the most important part of the delivery, which is the coffee, and head to the stairwell. I get into the elevator and hit the button for floor 9. The elevator then asks for my employee ID card, and I'm thinking, oh crud. So I try the lobby, which works. And from there, it's 9 flights of stairs until I'm outside the law firm of Bob, Dick, and Harry. After introducing myself, I'm shown to the room where the meeting's gonna take place. A table is set aside for me. I set down the coffee and head back for trip number 2. And that's when I see Sam talking to the receptionist. He then runs over and starts shouting at me saying, "I'm gonna put a boot on your car. I told you to park in the guest parking on the bottom floor." Now I don't get a word in before he launches into a speech about security and how I could be hurting his building or people. That's when a very well-dressed man walks over. It so happens to be Bob. The Bob of Bob, Dick, and Harry's. So Bob asks what the problem is, and soon the two are arguing. Bob then says, "OP's delivering food for my meeting. He's allowed to use my parking spots." Sam says, "Those parking spots belong to the building. You are leasing them like you lease this floor, and I'm the one who says who can park there. He is not an employee, so he is not parking." Bob then says, "Then I'm making him an employee." "No, you can't do that." Bob then says, "You know what? You're right. Harry, get over here." So Harry walks over with an amused look on his face, and Bob says, "So Harry here is the head of our HR department. Harry, hire this boy." Harry then pulls out a piece of paper and then scribbles, "OP is now a member of Bob, Dick, and Harry's." Harry signs it, and then he asks me to sign it as well, and I do. Bob reaches over to the receptionist, who's already grabbing some things, and Bob says, "Here's your employee badge, and your parking permit, and your elevator keycard. Now please, do the job that I have hired you to do, and deliver my bagels." Sam then looks on in utter fury as I ride the elevator down to my car. 7 sweet elevator rides later, all the food is delivered, and Bob and Harry meet me at the table. Bob tells me, "OP, you have made great strides in this company, and I'm so proud of your work. But I feel it's time for us to part ways. Here's your final check." Bob then hands me a crisp $50 bill. Harry says, "And here is your severance package. Now please, do make sure to return your badge and your card on the way out." Harry then hands me a $20 bill and sends me on my way. The receptionist is sure to validate the parking ticket that Sam gave me, and I head on out. So on the way out, Sam grins at me and asks me for my ticket. I then place it in the machine in his station. It sees the validation I got and lets me out for free. Sam then glares at me as I drive off into the late morning sun. Guys, I hate when people get a little bit of power and let it all go to their heads, guys. The security guard was 100% on a power trip, and I'm glad those lawyers had a good sense of humor to help OP out there. And hey, I would have turned down the bagel too if it was a bribe, but hand me a nice hot cup of coffee and I would have considered it 100%. So this happened a couple of years ago, and I finally found the right subreddit to post this, so here it goes. I worked at a fast food restaurant, and we had a scanner machine to check if money was real or not. One day, I touched the machine's sensor and noticed that it scanned my hand as money. I did this with paper as well, and concluded the machine was broken. So during the same shift, I had one manager that did nothing but sit on her ass all day, and only help us with orders if we were behind by 20 minutes. So I go and tell her about the machine, and she says she'll check it later. Now with my job, I'm supposed to scan a bill that's $10 or $20, and 50 and hundreds I have to give to a manager to check. A few hours go by, and she still hasn't checked it. And by this point, I'm checking every bill that's $10 or $20 by holding it up to a light, which can be seen as rude to a customer. One customer does complain to me and calls my manager over. The customer complained how I was picking on her, which I wasn't, and that I shouldn't be checking a $10 bill like she's a criminal. Now, instead of defending me saying the machine was broken and she hasn't checked it, she began yelling at me in front of this customer. She then, without even checking the machine, said to just use the broken machine anyways and said, who would even use a counterfeit $10 or $20 bill? So I decided the argument wasn't worth $9 an hour and I just complied. I quickly scanned every bill until I saw 2 shady acting women. The first woman handed me a $20 bill that was obviously fake, like I didn't even have to check it, it felt and looked like paper. I decided I would just follow orders and scan it. Since it went off, I put it in the register. The second customer came and handed me a similar counterfeit bill, and I did the same thing. Later, when my shift was about to end, my manager counted my drawer and found the 2 counterfeit bills, and she freaked out at me. Now, I did zone out for most of it, but most of it consisted of her calling me dumb, useless, etc. for not noticing this obvious counterfeit, and how I should pack my things because I'm getting fired. Well, what actually happened was the regional and general manager called me over to fire me before I told them the story. They then checked the cameras and listened to our conversation about the machine being broken. They then concluded that the manager was in the wrong for 1, not letting me check the bills, and 2, telling me to use a machine that I explained was broken. They then called her in the next day to fire her. So the funny thing is, I saw her a few months later working at a grocery store as a cashier. Hopefully she checks if she gets any counterfeit bills. My friends, it's so funny how karma works. She definitely deserved to be let go. Her work ethic was non-existent and she berates staff in front of customers, which in my opinion is the worst thing you can do. When I was 19 years old, I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life. The only thing I did know was that I needed money, so I started applying for all kinds of jobs. After a few weeks of writing applications, going to interviews, and waiting nervously for replies, I was hired as a full-time sales assistant at an international company making smartphones, TVs, and other electronic gadgets. The said company was in the process of opening their first official store in my country, and I was hired about 3 months before they were due to be opened, helping them however I could. I translated manuals, put security tags on products, etc., etc. Whatever they wanted me to do, I did. Sometimes until late at night, still foolishly thinking that this initiative would maybe be recognized in one shape or another. So alongside me, they hired 4 more people, 3 sales assistants and a store manager, all of whom were young and ambitious, just like me. The grand opening went very well. Business was booming for the first 2 weeks and everything seemed fine. And this is where the problem started. The first thing we realized that we didn't have were guidelines on how to handle returns and warranty cases. This annoyed a lot of customers. We were getting abuse on a daily basis that ranged from curse words to death threats, and once we even had to call security because a customer was threatening us. The stress caused one of my colleagues to quit, understandably. Now this, as it turned out, was only the tip of the iceberg. Some of the other problems we had included 1. Having a break room with no access to fresh water, no fridge, no microwave, and of course no bathroom, which are all big no-nos where I live. Number 2. Resupply came in sporadically at best. Sometimes we were resupplied twice a week, sometimes there were no deliveries for 3 weeks, making it very hard for us to tell customers when their devices would be arriving. And 3, the store manager was so incompetent that he couldn't even finish our schedules 3 days in advance, even though giving the schedule 2 weeks in advance is mandatory. One of my colleagues gave up a month before our grand opening and went on sick leave, which where I live basically gives you the immunity from getting fired, so now we were down 2 men. The bosses upstairs apparently wanted us to provide tech support over the phone, which again, none of us were trained to do. We did our best, but only really ended up with more threats in addition to having our official store phone number constantly blocked by these calls. Also, we were expected to take over social media communications as well, meaning now we had to answer questions on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, etc., putting even more of a strain on the small team. In the end, the manager couldn't deal with the stress anymore and broke down about 2 months after opening. The guy even sought psychological counseling after quitting. So while I was sad to see him go, I thought that now is my time, and I had to come prove myself. I took over most of his duties, still only earning about half what the manager made. Naively, I worked 60 to 70 hour weeks for almost 3 months straight, still thinking that this would somehow pay off. I made sure to tell my bosses how much more I did than what we agreed upon in my contract, but they didn't seem to care. That is, until our sales figures dropped. All of a sudden, I had 2 of them come into the store unannounced, basically dragging me into the back room and start lecturing me on how badly the store is performing. So the conversation goes something like this. Boss number 1 says, "So, why would you say the store's sales performance has dropped so much since the manager left?" I began to explain, saying that a lot of customers are unhappy with the way we're helping. Boss 2 says, "Our products are very competitive. Why are you struggling to sell them?" So me, slightly disgruntled, said, "Well, sir, as I was trying to say, the customers aren't happy with our service, and running a store with just 2 employees is almost impossible. If we could hire 2 more assistants, then maybe we could focus on bettering our numbers." Boss 1 says, "The interviews for those positions are ongoing. You will have new employees soon, but we hired you for a reason, so why don't you just do your damn job?" I told him, "Yes, sir." So after that meeting, I felt really defeated, doing all this extra work, staying late, and taking responsibility for things that I had no business taking responsibility for. The stress, the lack of sleep, and the death threats were all for nothing, and that's when it clicked in my head. I said, screw those guys. They wanted me to do my job, fine. From now on, I would do exactly what my job description says. Nothing more, nothing less. The next day, I came in early. I opened the store, everything was normal. Until the first tech support call came in. I picked up the phone, and after listening to what the caller wanted, I told them that I was only a sales assistant and therefore not qualified to answer any questions. I then hung up the phone without saying goodbye. Later, a postman came in with some special documents for the store manager, requiring a signature. I told him, nope, sorry, I'm not gonna sign that since I'm not manager. After being informed that these were court documents that needed to be signed immediately, I just shrugged and said, yeah, that's not my problem. I'm just doing my job here, man. So later that day, after my colleague arrived, we get a delivery of a new product for the store. The delivery guy handed me the manifest asking for a signature. Again, I declined, stating that I was just doing my job and the manager would have to sign that. After making it clear to them that I wasn't a manager on site, he left, taking all the new product with him. Product that we desperately needed. But I was beyond caring at this point. About 15 minutes later, I get a call from boss number 1, asking me why no one had signed for the delivery. I told him that since there was no manager on site, nobody there was allowed to sign that document. After a few choice words, he hung up the phone and I went back to work, chatting with customers and generally not caring about anything. About half an hour later, boss number 1 and boss number 2 descended onto me. They rushed into the store, demanding an explanation for my behavior. I simply replied, I'm just doing my job, sir, like you asked me to do. Boss number 1 says, what do you mean? Then why has nobody accepted today's delivery or the documents we've sent you? I told him, well, that's the manager's job, and I'm not a manager. Boss number 2 says, yes, you are. What the hell are you talking about? I told him, no, not only would my pay be pretty poor for all the work I'm doing, my contract clearly states that I'm a sales assistant, and as such, shall only fulfill duties related to that position. Boss number 2 says, and who the hell is supposed to do the manager's job if you don't? I told him, I don't know, but I would gladly do it if you doubled my salary, of course. Boss number 1 actually laughs in my face and says, who the hell do you think you are? We can have you replaced with someone cheaper in a heartbeat. I tell him, okay then, go ahead, I quit, effective immediately. And with that, I left. My remaining colleague, upon hearing me quit, also quit immediately, leaving our former bosses wide-eyed with no employees to run the store. I had also taken the liberty of informing the Health and Labor Board about our working conditions, as well as getting myself legal counseling for some issues related to the bonuses not being paid out. The store ended up having to completely shut down for about 2 weeks, until they had a skeleton crew back together to run it. So the kicker is about a month after I quit, and with my lawsuit for unpaid wages now pending, I got a call from boss number 1, telling me that he wanted to accept my offer of doubling my salary to become store manager. He said no one was willing to take the job, now that word got around how awful things are in the store. The following conversation ensued. I told him, frankly, boss 1, I don't like getting laughed at, so I'm afraid if you want me to come back, you're gonna have to quadruple my initial pay. Boss number 1 says, what? Are you insane? We can't afford that. How are we supposed to? That's when I interrupted him and said, I don't give a damn, boss 1, I really don't. But I've got an idea. How about you pull your head out of boss 2's ass and just do your damn job? That's when I hung up. My friends, I love hearing stories about crappy bosses denying a promotion to employees, but still expecting them to do that level of work, and then having it all come crashing down on them. Honestly though, some bosses miss out on great employees by just being stubborn. And that, my friends, brings us to another end of our /malicious compliance. Guys, if you enjoyed the stories today, do hit that thumbs up. And if you missed the last episode on the channel, a crazy mom teaches her daughter a lesson by confiscating her car. Her daughter's 22 years old and it's her car. You guys put it together. She gets in a heap of trouble. So check it out if you haven't, and I'll see you guys in the next one. I love you.